All right, all right. Hello, everyone. We are live. I think so. All right. So, if anyone can see the stream, please let me know in the chat. I just need to actually log in into the chat. Just give me 1 second. All right. I think we are good to go. Sorry about this, guys. Usually this works straight away, but not today. All right, cool. I have the chat ready, and it should be working in all the different platforms. So whatever you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment or just say hi, or if you have questions. Again, this is the whole idea of these live streams. So we are good to go. Let me just share the screen, make sure that that's also good to go. Great. All right. So we're gonna jump straight into it, just because I'm not feeling 100%, as you might, you can hear from my voice. But I do want to show you a few things and kind of like continue with this concept that we started last week, because uh, in 4 days, 4 days and a half, let me just check. We are finishing the contest for the creatures of the deep. So this creature that I'm doing is obviously relevant and related to that contest. So I want to give you as many tools as I can. So let me just check. So if you go to the Pablander Academy website, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, yeah, you still have 4 days and 14 hours to submit your entry. All the details are here. Just click on join event and you'll see everything in there. By the way, if you're not familiar with what we usually do in these type of live sessions, you can go to the Pablander Academy or pablander.academy, go to events, and then you'll see, first of all, this is the actual contest, but then you'll see we have done heaps of live streams where I cover different things. And these are great if you want to kind of like get inspired and try to produce something yourself for this contest. We have amazing prizes. But the reason I'm showing you this primarily is because yesterday we had a live stream that is fantastic with Andy Taylor. So if you click on this one, you'll be able to watch it straight from the website. And Andy showed us like a really fantastic way to iterate and create concepts from scratch. So he created a pretty amazing stuff within 2 hours. And I just think it's like a great way that if you haven't started with your entry for the contest, this will give you, I think, enough um, information and inspiration to do something and participate, because again, it's free and there's some amazing prizes that you can win, like the magic drawing pad, for example. So the first place in the contest gets a magic drawing pad from XP Pen. So it's really, really cool. Anyway, that is what I wanted to show you. Let's go back in here. So by the way, oh, hang on. Hey guys, welcome, welcome. Nice. All right. So we're gonna, like I said, jump straight into it and work on this creature. So right now, what I have is, you can sort of like tell what I'm looking at. It's just a weird squid-like creature, like a whale creature thing, but it's still pretty much a blockout. Now, the important thing that I want to highlight before I jump into anything else is that this thing, as it is right now, you can totally understand what it is, even if it is like a weird sci-fi thing or like made up fantasy creature. You understand the basics of it, the general shape of it, right? And that is what's the one of the most important things to get right before you start adjusting and adding secondary forms and all of that. That the primary forms, the shapes that create the silhouette of the character or the creature, whatever you're working on, are clearly defined, so that it simplifies the process and makes the next stage a lot simpler and not a lot easier. So in other words, you don't have to figure out what the design should be, because you have already locked in some of the major forms. You can just put some music in the background and relax, and start like working in this repetitive sort of pattern, which is adding volume, subtracting, adjusting, things like that. But you're not really thinking about the design. You already have it, so it makes it a lot easier. So it's super important. On that note, if you are keen to kind of like see this in a much more structured way, the entire series of making the thing for the Fantastic Four is up on the YouTube channel already. So just look for it. We have 5 videos taking you from absolute, like from the very beginning, just like blocking out with primitives, cubes, spheres, that sort of thing, all the way to render. So that shows like the entire process if you want to have something that is more like step by step. But with that said, we have that first step or second step, I would say, ready. And we're just going to concentrate on figuring out what things we can combine, because all of these things are separate, right? And you see we have this bit that has a Sculptris Pro. This is Dynamesh, I think. These ones are like, stretch. See, I think they were like a sphere, but anyway, like oh no, it's an insert mesh. I just remember. So we have like these insert sort of like flaps, and that is like a ZRemesher thing. We have this from the curved tubes. So we have a bunch of things. So I'm gonna first figure out what I can combine so that we can simplify the process. And the idea behind this next stage is to figure out how can we hide, let's say, connections and make it feel like it's a single thing. But obviously, if you have more subtools, or the more subtools you have, the easier it would be to work. So let's go ahead and do that. And also have the eye as well. It's just a single sphere. It only has one eye. You won't see the other side anyway. And by the way, if you were not here for the previous live stream, this is pretty flat, and we use the dynamics to sort of like flatten the blob, because the idea is that this is kind of like a weird giant creature that is being washed ashore, and people just come and see it. It's like, oh, what is this weird thing? That's the idea, or like that's kind of like the vision that I have. All right, so let's go ahead and start by combining the things that we need to combine. So I think I'm gonna split this bit. Let's turn this on. So I'm gonna split these ones, because I think let's say the blue one and this light green, they could be part of the body. And I'm also gonna bring in Epic Pen just so that you can see it properly, and I could explain things easier. Alrighty. So my idea, like I said, I'm thinking in terms of how I can integrate things so that it feels part of the same, and then just a bunch of like insert meshes and things like that. So this one right here could integrate with the rest of the body, and then maybe we can just fill this a little bit more so that it flows nicely. This, like the head type, this bit could also, maybe everything else could be added into one. And same thing as this one. So all of this could be part of the same mesh, as well as this, obviously. So this will be one single object, right? So let's say S1 or subtool 1 would be this. And then the rest of them, I can just keep them separate, I think, because you won't really see the connection. So that's the main thing that I want to sort of like show you. That, for example, this one right here, because it is underneath, oops, that's a horrible one. Because it is underneath this one, and the same thing is kind of like there. We can keep this separate so that we don't have any like overlapping sections. We can work on them separately, that sort of thing. And then you won't see really the connection. And here we can just come up with like a nice sort of maybe like some kind of like an anatomical reason for this to be like here, and then this will be like it will be very evident, like the line, but the whole point is to make it feel like there is something there. So that's the idea. The rest of the stuff, I reckon I'm just gonna leave them. Let's do a different color. With which one haven't we used? Let's go for blue. So this will be, this is part of the same mesh, actually. All of this. But I think the rest, we're just gonna keep them as a single object, as a single subtool, but separate objects. So I think we're gonna end up with 3 subtools plus the eye, so 4 subtools altogether. So this will be all the tentacles bits. That will be subtool 3. and these bits right here will be subtool 2. Okay, that's the thinking behind it. And of course, we can have for the eye subtool 4, right? So, and this is an important thing when you do your blocking, just so that you can plan the way that you're going to refine the volumes and make sure that what you have is solid, so that it makes it easier for the next stage. That's the whole point you do the planning. So let's get rid of that and let's do that first. So in order to separate this, we need to isolate them. So I'm going to hold Control and Shift to isolate these ones. And then in my UI, I have this split hidden, which for you guys would be under the split hidden. So when you have something hidden, that's it. And now I'm going to take these ones. I'm going to hold the Shift key. So this is right now in my subtool. I'm going to hold the Shift key and click on this arrow, and that will shift that all the way to the bottom. I'll do the same thing with this section, all the way to the bottom, and this section as well, all the way to the bottom as well. And I think those are the ones. So now I want to take this. I want to create a new folder. Let's just call it folder for now. Doesn't really matter. And let's drop this in here. All right, so we now an entire folder that we can hide. So that is the body. Then we have this bit right here, which is on its own, so that's fine. And we have some bits that we can get rid of. I'm just gonna remove anything that we're not gonna use, really. And I have saved this as a separate file, so it doesn't matter. I can come back if I need to. Oh, this is a good reference. I'm gonna keep the plane. That's the reference that I'm using as the floor. And that's it. Let's go ahead and merge this down. Or actually, let's create another folder, since I'm doing this kind of like properly. And I'll show you why. All right, so we have everything in folders so far. I just basically organized my subtool list. That's it. But now I can just go ahead, and because I have the folders, I can combine them or merge them and keep the originals. So I'm going to click on the gear icon and go into merge folder. And then I'll do the same thing here, merge folder. That's it. So now I can take these folders, put them at the top if I want to. And essentially, we can keep the original. So I have everything separate, but ZRemesher automatically hides everything once you merge a folder, or it hides everything that is in the folder. And now we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 subtools, as I mentioned. These are still separate objects, as you can see. But the good thing is we can now run a, something like the DynaMesh or remesh by union, that sort of thing, and then do a ZRemesher and start working on this. I'm just going to look at this area right here, and I want to go full screen so that you can see more of this, but not with my face. Again, I'm going to hide this for a second. Okay, cool. So yeah, I think we can work with this. I mean, at this point, I will probably just adjust this a bit more, because you won't see the inside of the mouth. I think it will be just the line of it. All right, I think that's good. And then maybe just add a bit of refinement here. All right. So again, like I said, you can just run DynaMesh. I'm going to click it just to show you. So it DynaMeshes everything, and you can just polish, and it is a single mesh, and then you can refine it. However, I prefer when I have my blocks and I have these, like these well-defined pieces, what I prefer to do is bring in my gizmo. I'm going to click on the gear icon, and I'm going to choose remesh by union. So the remesh by union, what it's going to do is going to look at the entire mesh, and is going to create, just show you. I don't know if it did it. Let me double check that. It didn't do it. So in theory, I'm going to show you first what the idea is, and then I'll figure out why it's not doing it. So if I open this, you'll see there's a bunch of, things inside. Maybe this is probably why it's not doing it. This thing right here. So it's going to get rid of anything that is inside the mesh, and it's going to make it watertight. So you're not going to have these sort of like pockets or anything like that. It's going to be a single mesh. So let's go ahead and do that first. Let me bring in this Sculptris Pro. I'm just going to try to fix this sort of like spikes that there is in the geometry for some reason. Just double check that they're not too bad. We probably need a bit more of volume here. So this is Sculptris Pro. It's nothing fancy or anything. It's just, you know, cleaning up this mess. And then we can also do a close holes just to make sure that we have all the stuff we need. And let's try it again. Gear icon, remesh by union. It says that the Boolean cannot be performed because some input subtools are invalid. So that might have to do with, like I said, some of the stuff like that comes from the Sculptris Pro, but that's okay. We're just going to fix it. I'm gonna auto group everything, just make sure everything is nice and clean. I think these type of things are the issue. So maybe I haven't seen all of them, but it shouldn't be a problem. So the easiest thing when you run into these issues, hopefully you know about this, but when you run into these issues, you can go to geometry, you can go to mesh integrity. So that is under the geometry subpalette. Click on that, and I'm going to click on check mesh integrity. So that is going to tell me, or it's going to say, yeah, mesh integrity test completed. That's fine. So it just looked at what is wrong with it, and then I click on fix mesh. That's it. So the integrity test completed and successfully. Let's go ahead and try it again. So you see now it worked perfectly fine. So all you have to do really, when you cannot figure things out, or you know, there's like an issue that is hard to spot, you can click on check mesh integrity and then fix the mesh, and that 99% of the time should fix it. But now, if I hide, let's say, portion of it and go inside, you'll see this is what the remesh by union does. So it removes anything that is inside and makes everything that is kind of like intersected a single mesh. So it obviously creates this. Let's turn off this. I'm gonna smooth this out. So you see, this is just to show you what it does. So it goes through the combination or the intersection of the meshes, and it combines or connects with triangles, the points in between. That's the beauty of it. So now we can go ahead and start adjusting this a little bit before we do the ZRemesher. Because if we do the ZRemesher now, it would work, but it might not be the thing that we want. So what I like doing is I'm going to enable Sculptris Pro. I'm going to enable polyframe just to show you what it does, obviously. And I'm going to start smoothing this area. So by smoothing with Sculptris Pro, not only I'm creating or I'm smoothing the surface, but I'm also creating geometry so that the transition becomes less evident, right? So that is the goal here. So I'm going to do this with not everywhere. Again, I want to try to maintain some of the sharp lines, like maybe around here. But you see, just by adding a little bit of smoothness with the Sculptris Pro, how things started to look more, unified. I think that's the word that I'm looking for. And definitely, we can just go ahead and adjust things in here, because there needs to be something here to, to pull this flap. But we'll come back to this. I just want to show you the general workflow first, and then we'll go into the specifics of the tools that I'll be using. And here as well, we can smooth this out. This one is kind of like the most important, I think, just to make sure that this transition from this fin or flap or whatever this is feels natural with the rest of the body. Alrighty. And then a little bit around here so that it's not as pinched. All right, let's have a look at the mouth, because obviously that was also combined, but I think it did a pretty good job, so we can just leave it as it is. And at the bottom, I mean, if you want, we can do the same thing. It doesn't take too long anyway, so might as well do it. But this is something that I wouldn't spend too much time if it's not going to be visible. All right, so now we have a better understanding of what this single shape does. I'm also going to smooth this with a lower resolution, or sorry, with a higher resolution, which means a smaller brush size. And that's essentially what the Sculptris does, right? The Sculptris Pro allows you to add more resolution based on the size of your brush. So just by smoothing with a smaller brush size, I'm just generating more geometry at the same time that I smooth all these areas. And that is just to help the ZRemesher a little bit more. Right, And just as a quick test, I like to do this just because sometimes when you use the Sculptris Pro, it could generate holes or triangles that are kind of like missing or floating around. So I'm gonna bring in my custom palette and go to auto groups, and you see if there was a different color, that would mean that there's some separation. There's a broken continuity of the loops or the topology. So this is pretty good. All right. And now, before I do the ZRemesher, what I'll focus on is on the adjustments of the secondary shapes. Let's actually add a bit more smoothness on these things, just so that you don't see the faceted polygons that much. We're gonna clean that up anyway, but it's good to have a good starting point. All right. So here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn off the Sculptris Pro, and I'm gonna bring in my custom clean builder brush. This is something that is a custom brush that I think behaves a little bit better than the clay buildup, just because it gives you like a cleaner, it's similar results or similar process, but it will give you a cleaner look. And this is a brush that you can download from the resources of the Pablander Academy. I'm also going to enable the backface masking, just because I'm going to be working on these areas right here on the fin. And these artifacts that you see here, those are the little things that I mentioned before that the Sculptris Pro can cause. So I'm gonna just smooth that out to create geometry there. All right. So so as I was saying, if you go to the Pablander Academy and then go to resources, you can just go ahead and type clay buildup, not clay, clean buildup brush, and that will give you this brush. All right. So I just wanted to have a little bit more volume here. We're gonna keep refining this a lot more, obviously, but just something before we move into the ZRemesher, so that anything that is a volume that I want to maintain in the topology, the ZRemesher keeps it, or like keeps that in mind, basically. So the same thing here. Maybe the larger brush. Enrique, hey Pablo, just picked up ZBrush on the iPad and discovered it. Oh, cool, man. Glad that you find them useful. Yeah, I have a whole series for the introduction of the iPad. I haven't had a chance to do any update because obviously they're newer versions of that. But what I share is kind of like the introduction to it, and it is still relevant. So I'm planning to do something else and kind of like showing like a full the creation of a full character, let's say, or something within the iPad, and I think that will be quite handy. All right. I think that is pretty good. I think I need to also adjust these things a bit more, because they're like, in terms of the tapering or the thickness, they are a little bit inconsistent from what we had with the dynamics. So I mean, they're not too bad. They're meant to be weird organic stuff. Alrighty. Let's get out of solo mode. So everything is working nicely. And this is what I was saying about this mesh kind of like integrating nicely with the rest. We can sort of hide it in there. And I think it'll look just fine. Alrighty. So I think that's good. Let's move into the retopology of this. So the simplest way of doing it, and I think just for this type of thing, is pretty easy. I'm going to hold the control key and click on the latest undo history on my timeline. And that basically saves this point. And now I'm going to go to the ZRemesher. And let's go with a polygon count. Actually, let's go for the kind of like the default 5,000. So this number is in the thousands. I'm going to click on ZRemesher. Obviously, we don't have symmetry in this creature. And that's pretty much done. All right, I think I need more resolution, especially around here. It's becoming a little bit weird. So let's increase the resolution a bit more. And let's see what this gives us. And if if it doesn't work, if it doesn't have the, oh no, that's pretty good. I mean, it could be improved a bit more, but I think this is pretty decent. Again, it's the point is to create a concept, and we're gonna use the high definition, or like the high resolution, high subdivision level, not this one. So if you're going, and this is something that I get asked quite a bit, because let me just explain this. So when it comes to topology, you definitely need to have something that is a good topology. So what we had before is not necessarily a good topology. However, what I would say, the messy one that we had before, it's still a very decent topology for a quick sketch, for a quick concept. So it works. Like, it's a topology that works for the purpose. The same principle applies to the outcome, or what you're expecting, or what you're planning to have or do with your concept or your mesh. So if my goal is to create an animation in a game engine that is going to ultimately produce a mobile app, right? Even though nowadays you can throw in plenty of information and polygons, I would need to optimize the amount of polygons, and I would need to think about the topology in terms of the flow of the edges, so that you can deform. So if I move the arm, there's going to be a certain loops that will allow the deformation to maintain a consistent volume, and maintain the uh, the shape of, like, let's say if it's a human, the shape of the human, and it's not going to distort it too much. So in that case, this topology that I have right now wouldn't necessarily work. It might work a little bit because there's plenty of points, but it might not give you the exact deformation that you need. So if you have that as a context, if you worked on games and that's kind of like your world, and you've been constantly hammered into your head that the topology has to be perfect, the loops has to be, in certain way, there's supposed to be like a mask around the eyes, that sort of thing, then you would look at this and you go, oh, this is a really bad topology. But my argument is that it is not bad topology. It's just bad for the context of but for your context, or for what you want to achieve. But because that's not my goal, this is a perfect topology. This is my point. So this topology, it doesn't mean that it's good enough, or it's something that we can work with. It means it is a good topology. That's what it is. It's just that my goal is to create a concept, something that I'm just going to render out and have details, and then create a final image. That is my goal. If I want to do animation, then this is not going to be a good topology. If I want to do 3D printing, right, this doesn't really matter. I could just stay with Sculptris Pro or Dynamesh and just increase the resolution to polish the surface, and the topology wouldn't matter. It would be a perfect topology for 3D printing. So this is a very important concept that I think is crucial to understand, because a lot of people get into this sort of weird loop and argument that this is horrible topology, or this doesn't work, and look at the endgons, or, well, in this case not endgons, but like these star points, that this should be improved a lot more, and you can definitely do that. It's like, yes, the answer to that is yes, it's not good, but most of the time is because of the context, or your frame of mind of how you approach topology. In my case, this is great. I will recognize that maybe this area right here doesn't have like a nice flow, but again, you'll see what I mean. If I just go ahead and subdivide this to 4, and then go to the project tab, which is here on the subtool palette, go to project. I'm going to turn off color. I'm going to click on project history. That is going to project that safe state that we had before into our mesh. And you see, we recover all the details. Everything is good to go. And we now have a nice topology, and we have subdivision levels. Now, the reason I say that this could be optimized, but I still think it's a perfect topology for what I'm doing, is because the goal here, the reason why I would do retopology even in a concept, and not just stick with Dynamesh or Sculptris Pro, which you can totally do, is because I like to have control over my details and the surface. So when you have a clean topology that has all these quads, when you subdivide it with this method that basically it's called the Cadman-Clark subdivision, it divides each one of these kind of like exponentially, right, and creates a clean surface with lots of points. Because you have these quads, it allows you to create details a lot better. It's not going to run, or series is not going to run into a triangle that is going to create like artifacts or spikes that won't look good as a clean mesh for adding details. Now, the argument as well would be like, well, you can have like a really high density mesh with Dynamesh and do plenty of details, and you'll be okay. And again, that is totally fine. You can do that. But I'm trying to work on something that has not 100 millions of polygons. I'm gonna do something that I'm gonna get it to a point, maybe 5 million polygons, that sort of thing, that I can then export and render straight away without needing to optimize it further. So all of the arguments and everyone that would say this is horrible in terms of topology or doesn't work for a certain thing is all about the context. I think, like in anything in life, context is king. So in the context of what we're doing, this is perfect. All right. So that was like a really long spiel about why I do this the way that I do it. Let's go ahead and go into this high subdivision level now that we have it. And what I'll do is I'm going to run a quick polish. That's just like a generic softening of the mesh. And then I'm going to go into my clay buildup, or clean buildup, sorry. And I'm just going to start working on those sort of secondary forms. Maybe we can switch to something like this. And this is another really cool tip that I can give you when you're working on especially hard surface, but also in in organic shapes. You can switch to a material or a matte cap that has a bit of shininess to it, and that allows you to visualize that sort of bumpiness and keep things clean. So I'm using the smooth brush to clean this up and make sure that whatever volume I add, it is integrated nicely. So add a little bit of strokes here, and then use the smooth brush to keep those areas clean. That's the goal. All right, let's figure this out a little bit more. Another thing that I'm kind of like thinking as I adjust this is that because this is a sea creature, and I think I mentioned this in the previous stream or one of the streams that we've done about the sea creatures, the skin of the creature, or the surface details are gonna be pretty minimal because it is meant to be like a very moist and soft type of skin, usually, almost like a rubbery material. So the point is that it won't have that many wrinkles, or at least not that many memory wrinkles or faults. So all of these things will be a bit more subtle. All right. Let's refine this a bit more. I'm going to switch back to the basic material. I see the forms a bit better with this, like the larger forms. So these are not details, obviously. I'm just refining the, not even, I would say, even though it looks like, I guess you can say that they're secondary forms, but my primary focus right now is on the integration of the forms, not in creating more shapes to worry about. Let's do a bit more here. Because here, this is where there could be a bit of a fold or a wrinkle, purely because there's going to be some crunching of the skin. Let's see the chat. Cool. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in there. Happy to answer anything that you want. And do let me know how you're going with the creatures of the deep contest, because I can see there's like plenty of activity in the Discord, so that's great to see. But also keep in mind that if you don't want to participate in the Discord, kind of like feedback and stuff like that, you can totally just create your own thing and share it on Instagram. That's also totally valid. But it is great to see like the work in progress that people share. I think that's like really valuable. All right, so I think this is coming along nicely. Just a quick refinement of the shapes goes a very long way. Let's do a little bit more around here, around the mouth area. Alrighty, I think that works. Oh, there's a little bit of stretching here. Let's fix that straight away. This is just the artifacts from the initial extrusion that we created. But because we have the nice topology, we can easily smooth that out. This is these tentacles or these parts right here feel a little bit too bumpy, but that is because of the nature of the process we use to create or generate these shapes, which was the dynamics. So it just creates a bunch of like crinkly shapes. But just a quick clean build up with strong smooth brush does the trick. All right. Let me go back into the full screen so you guys can see a bit more of this. And let's go ahead and bring in the rest of the shapes to kind of like the same stage. This is something that I actually cover in the Extra Mile course. So with my students about like, in terms of processes and things like that. So one thing that I recommend is to, for example, if you already cleaned the app and you have like a nice topology on the main body, for example, what I like doing is just assign a color. It doesn't mean anything in terms of like what color I use. It could be absolutely anything, but that way it sort of gives me a sense of progression. Even if I only have like 1 hour to to work on this today, at least by the end of that hour, then I'll see, okay, the blue subtool, the blue section, it is ready for details next time that I jump in or whatever, right? So it gives you like a sense of progression, and you can see how much you progress in the time that you have or that you have allocated for this type of projects. So I'm going to select this one now, and I'll do the same thing that I did before, but this time I'm not going to save a point because this one is a pretty simple shape. I don't have like any crazy details or anything, so I don't need to save anything. Let's go ahead and do a ZRemesher. And let's actually, I'm going to go back to the body 1 second, go to the lowest subdivision, and I just want to compare the amount of polygons. So I think I can reduce this a bit more, just so that we can maintain a good balance between all the shapes. And that way we can sort of have the same subdivision levels. So it's just like an extra thing to consider. All right, so I'm gonna go with the move topological and the AQ curve and adjust this. Also, let's go into the highest one. Okay, so let's figure this out. So again, the idea with this next step of integrating shapes is also to figure out what's the best way to showcase, or in this case that we don't have symmetry or anything, we have already kind of like a pose creature. What's the best way to showcase those volumes so that they look realistic and at the same time it shows like a cool pose for the creature. All right, I think that's pretty good for that one. This one is also relatively easy to integrate it. Maybe from here. All right, that's not too bad. Let's go ahead and subdivide this. 4 subdivision levels, that's plenty. And just to make sure I have some good transitions of shapes, I'm gonna add a bit of volume to suggest again that there's a tiny, not tiny, but like a visible muscle or something that is going to pull. So it's not like a flat thing, you know. Same thing here. We can increase this quite a bit and then use the smooth brush, of course. The goal here is that now that we have the blocking is to maintain some sort of um, clean volumes all the time. So that's why I use the smooth brush often. All right. Cool. I think that works. This one didn't need much work. So again, select the color fill object, and then I have now the sense that I sort of polished the surface, and I have everything ready for this, and I can start working on some more finer details, or not finer details, but like adjusting the secondary shapes of this a bit more. All right. Cool. Any questions, guys? Anything you want me to cover on this? Let's go ahead, and because we have about 15 more minutes to go. So I'm just gonna get this one ready. So these ones are all good. What I'm gonna do is just bring them to the same sort of level of um, a consistent level of topology, right? So again, this is a perfect topology for what we're doing. However, the larger tubes, have larger stretch polygons. So this one is not ideal, not even for the context or the type of topology that we are doing, because in this case, what we want to have is consistency in terms of the polygon. So having something like that, right? Let's like make it larger here and just explain the reasoning behind this. If you have something like this, what happens is that when you subdivide it, ZRemesher is going to subdivide it like this and like this. So you end up with the same sort of like long shape, right? And then if you subdivide it again, you're still going to end up with the same length, right? So in other words, the size of this shape keeps changing, but the ratio remains the same. Like it's not that at some point this is going to be a square. And the problem with this is that when I'm going to do I don't know, a detail, right, that goes this way, like a reach or something, is going to work great because we have plenty of lines or subdivisions. But when I try to do something like this, then I'm going to run into the issue. If it is a pattern that is very thin like this, we're going to run into the issue that we're not going to have enough topology, and then we're going to need to subdivide this even more to be able to describe these details. But lengthwise will be fine. So all of this is just to say that when you have something like this, it's not that it's like really bad, because you can subdivide it even more, and you'll be okay. But I like to keep things consistent. So let's do a quick ZRemesher just with the default settings to see what it looks like, and that's a lot better. So you see now all of the tubes have similar consistency. You could increase this a bit more, so that you have more of these square polygons that I mentioned. Let's try 6. Yeah, it's not too bad. Once we subdivide it, it will be okay. Let me just do a bit of a smoothing just to make sure that the tapering of this is nice. It's smoothing, and this one as well. And let's do it again. And let's bring in the rest so that we can check in terms, in the lowest subdivision, the size of these things. So I think we can add more. Again, if your goal is to optimize it to have something like really, really low, you can just play with that. But that's not my goal. My goal is to have a clean topology or quads that are nicely distributed, that are well balanced, so that when I add the details, it works nicely. And it's not about, sending this to a mobile game. So I think that's fine. Let's hang on. Accidentally brought in my Wacom settings. All right, cool. So now let's take this one. Let's subdivide this. So we should have a pretty clean set of tentacles. We can run a polish as well, just to polish the surface. And then in the lowest subdivision level, my goal now would be, again, with the same idea of the transitions, to do these little nudges to make sure that the weight of these pieces actually makes sense. So there's no intersection, but they could be, I'll show you what I mean by this. There could be a section that this is kind of like squashed into it. So if I go to auto groups, which for you guys that will be on the polygroups and auto groups, that just creates a single polygon, or polygon ID for each tentacle in this case. I'm gonna isolate this one, and in here I'm gonna use something like the clay brush, but I'm gonna press the Alt key. So I'm gonna push this like that. So this should create, actually not even with the clay brush, we could use it. We could use a trim dynamic just to trim this area a little bit. So this is going to flatten this area a bit more and create that illusion that the other tentacle is kind of like putting pressure, or like, preventing this to go further, right? It's like an obstacle. So that's cool. You can adjust things with the move topological. So yeah, that is the goal with this next step. So all the tentacles they should feel like they're independent and they have their own weight, and there's no much intersection to them. I think there was one here, this one. This one is a tricky one, but with the move topological, you should be able to just push one section. There we go. All right. Same thing here. Okay, this is another cool trick that you might be interested in testing out in case you're doing something with, basically, if you want to do something that has some weight to it and you want to make sure that it's grounded or that is hitting the ground properly. You see, I have a bunch of things in here. Let's bring in the plane. So my plane has a some thickness to it. Just want to check. Yeah, so roughly around there. So there's a bunch of things in my tentacles that are kind of like going through. So with this reference of the plane and with my tentacle selected, I can just go ahead and hold the control key, click and drag. I'm sorry, guys. I was just coughing. So click and drag, go into solo mode, and you'll see I have these sections that are masked out. Now I'm going to invert my mask, maybe going to the subdivision level, one level higher, and I'm going to blur it slightly. Right? So now I'm going to bring in, we can do this in many different ways. I think the easiest one, let's just do it with the easy way. I'm going to do a quick save just in case. So from this angle, let's bring in the plane again. I'm going to use the clipping brush. So the clipping one is not going to cut anything or damage the topology. It's going to flatten the topology based on the shaded line. So something like that. That's it. So I just clipped those in there. But you see the topology is pretty much the same. It's just pushing those things. So now this area is flat. However, I'm not finished, right? We still have the mask. So what I'll do at this point is invert it and do a little bit of a smoothing so it doesn't feel as strong, that sort of process that we did. Oh, there's a tiny intersection here that I need to fix. And then we can clear the mask, go into the subdivision level, and do another softening pass. But this is a very simple way of achieving that sort of look that there is some volume pressed against something. We can enhance it, of course, but that will be the next stage, which I'll show you what I mean by this, by enhancing it. So if we take the standard brush, what I'll do is in this section, you see, also let me bring in some polypaint so that you know what I'm talking about. Let's make this green, and then I'm going to use orange. Okay, so what I mean by this is that the orange section right here of this tentacle is the one that is pressed against the floor, right? So this is the areas that are in contact with the floor, nothing else. So that means that if I look at it from this angle, all right, let me see if I can explain this properly, because it's an interesting thing to understand about the consistency of volumes and the, something like this. Okay, you cannot see the orange, but anyway. So let's assume that this is like the full tube, right? So if you were to look at this from the side view, which is what I was trying to do, right? Like like a clean cut, like a slice of this. If you're looking at this and you go, okay, the floor is this one right here, right? So let's call this one floor. What happens obviously is that this whole section will be flattened against that line that we created with the clip mask, right? So, or in other words, let's just do it with this. It will be like this. So this is the floor, and then you will have this flat. So this is currently what we have, right? So this section right here is the green, and this section here at the bottom is the orange. Okay, now we're making this a bit messy, but let's go back. So so again, the yellow line is with what we currently have, but because there is a bunch of mass here in this section, and we want to make things as realistic as possible in terms of how we present this creature, this whole mass doesn't disappear. Like there needs to be a conservation of that energy, or like the mass that it gets flattened to. So what happens is that this creates, or we can do this, just add a little bit of like thickness or additional volumes to the side, so that all of this gets sort of like spread across, right, when it gets pushed. And this is what really, like, what happens in real life. So if you take like a balloon and you fill it with water and you do the same thing, you'll see how it just sort of like deforms. In fact, now that I mentioned the balloon thing, let me show you something, because this is like crucial. Let's get out of this one. So if you go to the Pablander Academy, go to events, you can scroll down. We did one with Gio. So let's go back a few live streams. This one. So with Gio Nakpil. So obviously he explains it a lot better than me. But there is a section that he covers the exact same thing that I'm showing you in terms of thinking about the anatomy or the muscles, or the general transition of volumes with balloons full of water. I think you're gonna really love that one. So make sure that you check that one. And that is pretty much what I'm sharing in here, that we need to consider that sort of redistribution of the masses. So in practical terms, what this means is that I can take my standard brush and then I can add some volumes along the side. Let's clean. Now that you understand, I'm gonna clear the poly paint. And that simple thing creates such a additional level of realism, and it's so simple to do. Just trying to look at references. I guess it also comes down to, if you have a good set of reference, that you have a good eye for looking at the reference and understanding how the volumes work. So if your reference has that, try to actually follow what you see in the reference, right, rather than what you think would work. So in fact, do as I say, not as I do, because I don't have a reference right now. I'm just kind of like going for a bunch of other references that I have collected in my, you know, in my time. But memory could be very deceiving. It's just that the things that I'm doing right now, I know they are likely to work because they're kind of like almost a universal law of that sort of conservation of that mass. But of course, depending on the type or quality of the material, depending on the structure of the material, if it is something very, very soft, if it's kind of like a jellyfish type of thing, then this would be even flatter, and the spread of this will be even larger. Or if it's something really, really thick, almost like maybe it has bones or some other structure underneath, then this is going to be even less. So that's when it comes, like, when I would say, let's go into the resources, see what this specific structural material, how it behaves, and let's try to replicate that. But in this case, like I said, I think I have a pretty decent idea of what this creature would look like, or what it should be. So just adding a tiny bit of volume around these areas will enhance the look and feel quite a bit. Alrighty. So very subtle stuff, but I think it works. All right. So now we can go ahead and assign the same color. We sort of brought everything to the same level of polish. The only thing I need to do is make sure that the integration is a bit better. Oh, this bit can be in here because you don't even see it. I'm going to do a pinch here just to sharpen this and then move this up. All right, so this one also has a weird insertion here. So I'm gonna think about this, and this is another, simple, not trick, but something to consider when you're doing this type of stuff. Um, think about how these shapes transition into the, let's say, the larger shape. In general, there would be some kind of tapering like this, unless it is more of an insect or an arachnid or any of that sort of family of stuff in nature, that you can clearly see like a very divisive connection between the, let's say, the legs of a spider or the legs of a grasshopper, right? But in more mammals, for example, that you won't find this like really sharp transition from one shape to the other. So adding a little bit of taper for these things that are visible at least would really help. Let's see from the other side. You won't see anything. Cool. All right. So basically, today has been more about some kind of like theory tips, I think. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. All right, let's go into the high subdivision. And I'm going to go back to the body here, and I'm going to add some volumes here just to, again, justify how this other shape joins the rest of the body. Oh, sorry, guys. I see some activity in the chat. Yeah, just keep dropping your comments and questions. I'll just check them out in a second. All right, something like that would work, I guess. And we can sharpen some of the insertions a bit more with the Geo brush as well, or the DamStandard. You don't have to use this one, but this is something. If you want this one, go to the Blender Academy and get it. It's free, of course. And that basically helps you sharpen up some of these forms. So now it does feel that there's something there. I like to use the Geo brush with a large size as well, because that creates that crevice, but it also maintains the consistency of the volume that you initially had. So it doesn't just carves; it just sort of keeps everything and starts to bring in a bit of pinching, which is something cool to see. Let's do that. All right. Let me adjust this. Just looking at any sort of intersection might have happened. All right, cool. So we now have a pretty decent base to start adjusting. I think this tentacle is still a bit lumpy, so I'm gonna do a quick smooth pass. But yeah, we now have something that we can start refining even more, and potentially add details or some ridges and all that stuff. We are pretty close to wrap up today, so let me just check the chat. Drop any questions you might have. Oh, hey John, how you doing? Um, Alberto is talking about a video that I did about managing the BPR filters to control the ZBrush render. So Alberto is asking about like more about shaders and materials, which we're not going to get into this one, not today at least. But there is plenty of tutorials and things that I've created that cover that. Very briefly, if you go to resources um, in the Palandra Academy, there just from the top of my head. So you have these filters. These are not tutorials, but you can get this is like a set of filters that you can download, and basically it takes your mesh, anything you have in ZBrush with a markup gray, in one click you render it, and using filters, which is what you asked for, it creates this sort of like comics, or not comic style, but like a sketch, right? And it has plenty of it. So all of these ones are 3D models that I rendered with these filters. So I created this sort of, pencil like stuff. This one is more like a pen type of thing. So all of these ones are literally 3D models that I just click once with the different filters that come in this pack, and it generates this effect. So this has to do with those things. In case you want to check them out, here you can see a little bit more of the various filters that I use and that I combine, and show you how you can adjust it yourself. So you can change from the blue pencil to a red pencil, that sort of thing. Anyway, just have a look because this is relevant to what you're asked. In terms of tutorials, if you go, there's also um, let's see. If you go to, I think, let's just type. If you click on this search and type comic, okay, here it is. So the comic style material. So all of these things are for comic stuff. Um, you can click on comic material, right? And in here, you have a bunch of materials that you can download and you can play with it. So if you're interested in this sort of thing on how you create materials, what I would recommend is just download one of these and see, you can open the modifiers and literally see how they put together, and then you can adjust them and create your own. So that is it. Now, in terms of the tutorials, if you go to tutorials, you can type. Oh, by the way, this is what I mentioned before about the making of the thing. So we already have the 5 videos in here. So you can just go through all the entire series. It's kind of like a breakdown of what I showed you today from the very beginning, starting with these primitive shapes. Then we adjust them. Basically, what we've done today, or this one, what we've done today is kind of like adjust the volumes and refine the shapes like this. And then you move into adding details with a cool technique that I show you, and then the render. So if you're interested in that, that is there already. Um, Going back to what I was saying, you can type here materials, not MS, materials. So yeah, I have a few things that are relevant to materials here. So this is the one that I'm looking for, and this one as well. Yeah, so these two are strictly related to your question about the BPR. So it's called the comic style outlines with geometry in ZBrush. So this is an old trick that I learned a long ago, but it is still relevant to this day. Just has to do with the flip of the normals, but it is still really cool. So you can sample things. And this one is more about a walkthrough of this specific project and how I set it up. This is basically a render from ZBrush using the polypaint and the matcap material that I use for my comics. That's it. So hopefully this helps. Oh, and one thing now that we're here, just because I think I forgot to mention, this is a relatively new thing that we added. So if you go to the resources, we have now these normal maps. So these are very simple normal maps that you can download, especially for detailing in Substance Painter. It's nothing to do with ZBrush now, but you can download these ones and detail your hard surface beats with a bunch of alpha. So all of these ones are free. Just feel free to check them out. We're constantly adding things to the library of things. So yeah, just keep an eye on the Pablender Academy. Anything that has, if you go all the way to the bottom, I think we already show you that, but let's clear the filter. I think it's already gone. But basically, anything that is new or relatively new would have like a little tag here that says new, so you know that is new, or just basically by date. Anyway, so that is all good. Let's wrap it up here, guys. Just with a couple more things, and if you have some last minute questions, happy to answer them. But let's just go ahead and use the standard brush just to continue the refinement process of what we did before. I'm just going to add a suggestion of a musculature here, some muscle. And also one thing that you might notice is that my set of tools at this point and the amount of brushes that I use are very limited. Even though I have custom brushes for, let's say, the clean buildup and that sort of thing, it is still a very simple brush. It's just that I adjusted so that I can work faster with, cleaner surface and that sort of thing. But I'm just using that smooth brush and a lot of the standard brush as well. So it's it's nothing fancy here. I'm not having any of the custom brushes that I have for details. For obviously, for obvious reasons, we're not doing details just yet, but also because for the blockout and for the importance of blocking out a sculpt, you don't need more than this. You don't need fancy brushes. You don't need anything crazy. You can adjust the existing brushes and generate something that allows you to work faster. It doesn't mean that it's going to make your process better. It's just going to be faster, I think. Um, so yeah, if you want to stick with the standard brushes and the basic brushes that come with ZBrush, by all means. So to give you an example, the Geo brush is something that I developed based on that really nice set of forms that Geo Nakpil does. So it's kind of like in reference to what how he works. But I created it because I wanted to have something sharper that doesn't pinch as much in terms of the surface compared to the DamStandard brush. So I could do exactly the same thing that I'm showing you with the standard brush, right? But you see how, like, if I do a couple of things like this, I'm pressing really hard, but it already kind of like changes the surface quite a bit. Whereas the Geo brush is really concentrated in one area. So it's the same thing. All I've done is adjusted to suit my workflow. But it's not more than that. Like that's all it does. It just helped me speed up the workflow. Figure this out a bit more. Um, hey, Grimmy Spejo. Do I have any tutorial about 2.5D? I think I do. I just can't remember. Just go to the Pablender Academy and type 2.5D. If I have anything related to that, it will be properly tagged, so you could just easily find it. If not, we can just make something. All right. I think we need something a bit more obvious for this area. It's a bit of a larger change of shapes, but it sort of helps define this bit. And another thing about this, adding these additional ridges or secondary forms, is that it will allow you to, in this case, define a little bit of the rotation, so that it's not like boring the same thing. So just adding this and going through it, it provides a bit of a visual reference of how this is twisting. Another simple but effective trick when it comes to these creatures. All right, so I think you would agree that what we have now, it's it's a lot more polished and clean, even though the the current, the current silhouette is different. I just want for comparison, just so that you really understand what I'm trying to say about the primary shapes. Um, it's very evident. So what I'll do, I'm gonna bring in the original, so the one that we started with. All right, and let's do a quick screenshot here. Shift S. Let's switch to the other one and bring it here. All right. So you see, in terms of the silhouette, the change is minimal, like barely noticeable. There's some like tweaks to enhance it, but it's barely minimal. And that is because this blockout, this setup that we did is fundamental to be able to just have fun with the shapes and the details later on and all of that. But you see, there is no change or barely any change in the silhouette, just like some refinements, let's say here around the top and the fins and that sort of thing. But it is minimal. So the focus was on integrating things so that it feels part of the same thing, rather than just a bunch of unconnected volumes. So that is the importance of these steps, to make sure that you have that right. And if you can, or like if you don't feel comfortable with this, or not don't feel like it's there yet, the cool thing is that you can adjust things quite a bit and add more pieces, remove pieces, destroy things with the Sculptris Pro. But the essential thing is that you need to be 100% confident that this shape, these general volumes hold, so that the next step is a lot easier, because you just make sure that they integrate. You're not figuring out the design. The design is for the most part there, right? So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that, because I think it's one of the most important things when it comes to anything that you do in ZBrush. And of course, I'm sure you maybe yourself, but I've seen some artists that are fantastic about taking a simple sphere and then start extruding things and literally treat the sphere in ZBrush like a ball of clay, and then pull it and extract it and all of that. That is, and it's something that I use as well. I wouldn't, I'm not gonna say I don't, but it's something that I wouldn't recommend if you're starting with ZBrush, and it's something that I wouldn't recommend if you are trying to recreate something from a sketch or from a reference. The other approach, that is not the primitive blocking, let's say, which is that more free sculptural, more traditional sculptural, is great for exploring shapes. So, if you're just exploring things, like, if I were to just do this, for example, I'm going to do this very briefly. Don't worry. I can bring in my Sculptris Pro and I can start doing this, just to explore a creature, right? I'm going to do a quick bust um, made up thing, right? But I'm using the same thing, or like the opposite thing, really, to what I show you in this process, and the opposite thing to what I'm recommending, which is essentially block and work with blocks of shapes that are very simple, uh, so that you can understand those shapes a bit better, and then it allows you to change things. But you can do this. Like, there's no reason why you cannot do that. And if you're comfortable doing this, by all means, right? So this is like a completely different approach to the one I show you, and you can go very detailed. Let's do this with Sculptris Pro. You can start defining things like the eyes. And actually, I have a workshop where I show how to do this, right? Or my approach to this type of, like, the steps for this approach, where I'm just like figuring things as I go. So the biggest difference, I would say, is the ability that you have to essentially explore a design. So let's say this is just a very simple thing. Just for fun, I'm gonna bring in one of my brushes. Oh, I don't think I have it here. I don't have it. I have a brush. Oh no, here it is. Horn antlers, quick concept. So this has definitely no blockout, or I mean, this is the blockout. It's just that the approach of it is a lot more organic, um, and I think it works. Again, is more about like a preference. My suggestion is that when it comes to primitive blocking, like I've been showing you with the other creature, it gives you a lot more structure. So if you're already super comfortable with ZBrush, and this is something that you might don't have to do, or you might not want to do, but to be honest, this is the best approach. Sorry, the primitive blocking is the best approach. Um, I would suggest, because it gives you that freedom of connecting the things. Sorry, like in terms of the freedom, this is a lot more free to explore shapes. But the other one, the other approach with the primitive blocking, even though it gives you constraints, it gives you the freedom later on to refine things, because you already have the design locked. I don't know if that makes sense. What I'm trying to say is that even though this one is very free and you can explore designs, the other one gives you a much more structured approach that allows you to, it kind of like restrict your design choices, but in a good way. Whereas with this one, let's say if I have this quick concept and go, you know what, this doesn't really work for me. Let's just go for some kind of like horn like that. Maybe something like this. I don't know. I can very easily do this, right? Whereas if I'm doing the primitives or the primitive blocking, maybe I have a much more defined idea that of what I want, because of the references that I've collected, or anything of that nature. So it is going to be a lot easier to block it out. Whereas right now I don't have any idea, I don't have any reference. I have a suggestion, but purely because of the horns that I added, that this could be some kind of moose, or weird sort of bovine creature, or not bovine, more like a goat. Is it a goat? A bovine? Or I don't think it has its own classification. I don't know. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that this is like really free, and you can explore a lot of designs, and you might end up with something that is truly original and weird looking and all of that. However, if you approach it in this way, where you have a very structured approach, you still have the ability to explore with the primitives and then just move it and push it like we have the original. This is pretty much the same thing. The biggest difference is that we are 100% happy with this before we move into the polishing. And that's it, guys. So hopefully this gives you, I don't know, some food for thought. If you have any questions or anything after this stream, feel free to reach out. If I have time, I'm always happy to answer questions. Other than that, I'll probably see you last week for another live stream, but then I'm going to take a break for a couple of weeks, and then we'll come back. But yeah, another thing is we will have another session for the working together, or like the co-working sessions in the Discord. So make sure that you check the Discord, and there will be an event in there pretty soon. And yeah, so that is it for me, guys. Hopefully this has been of help. And cool. Yeah, I'm just checking the chat. All good. All right, guys. So thanks so much for tuning in. Oh, it's my camera here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Again, hopefully this has been of help. And if you have, any suggestions, anything that you want me to cover in these live streams, I honestly just do these live sessions purely for you guys. So if you have, a specific thing that you want to tackle, or like feedback or anything, feel free to reach out. If you're part of the newsletter, I usually just share my thoughts of the week or things like that, or a tip in the newsletter. But I also ask for feedback, so you can reply directly to that email. By the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, sometimes I just assume that you guys know all this stuff. So sorry about that. So the newsletter is something that I send like on a regular basis, almost every week. So you can go to the Paplander Academy. You can click on newsletter, and these are all the different tips that I share in the newsletter. But I share more than that. So in the newsletter itself, in the email that you will receive if you're part of the list, you get the tip of the week, or like something that I found interesting or whatever. Sometimes it's just like a more of reflection thing. But then I have also updates. So I will tell you, oh, we did this, live stream with Andy, or in the next week we have this other live stream, that sort of thing. So it's basically a way to keep up with all the stuff that we're doing. But yeah, so if you just want like the tips, you can just go here I think there is one here for that. So Alberto that asked for BPR. So if you type BPR, there we go. So there's a bunch of tips that have to do with BPR that might be useful. So this one is a cool one: how to create a matcap like the Predator, Predator look. This is just a quick sketch, but you can turn these sort of, not infrared, the heat sort of map view. Oh, sorry, I'm not showing the. What am I doing? Sorry, guys. So I was just showing all of this. So if you go, let me do it again. So if you go to the Pablander Academy, go to the newsletter. Here we go. You have all of these tips. So I wasn't showing the screen before. So this is one of the recent ones, and I basically gave you a tip on how I use the golden ratio and some simple things that you can do for design. So this is something that you can apply to your creatures of the deep as well. So this is more about like conceptual ideas, but some of them are pretty practical. Like I said, if you type BPR here, this one, so when I'm showing you, so you can recreate that sort of like predator sort of vision with a simple image and a material. So for Alberto that asked about the BPR, that is all part of the same thing. But yeah, so there's plenty of tips here on all sorts of things. So these ones are relatively random because they're like things that I either work on that week or that I discovered that week or that I remember, or someone asked a question. This is the reason I'm showing you. If you have questions, sometimes if it is a good question that I go like, this is something that everyone will benefit from, I will just do something like this and then kind of like show you a bit of the workflow. So this one is how to go from plasticity, probably you know about that, to ZBrush. So I just show you how to go from like a CAD app like this, like nerves, into something that is pretty usable in ZBrush. And yeah, you can just then send it to Painter and all that. Anyway, so I think the newsletter is useful. All you need to do is go to the newsletter and subscribe here. You can do it from absolutely any other place in the website. So if you go to events and you click on any event, let's say Andy's workshop, and you go to the bottom, you can subscribe here to the newsletter as well. You can also go to the bottom of any page and you can subscribe there. So there's plenty of ways to just be part of my newsletter. That's kind of like my direct communication with you, with people that are like truly invested and interested in the things that me and the rest of the Pablander Academy crew shares. So this is the best way, and in a way, it's just the best way also to get feedback from you guys, so that we can infuse these live sessions with whatever you want to see. All right. Sorry, like now there are some questions coming in. Can you do a live stream on concepting, cleaning up, polish, retopo? This is pretty much what we've been doing. So if you want, just go back to a few sessions and you will see it in there. And if you want to see how to transfer your concept into a rendering tool, we also, maybe you just came a little bit later, but it's all in the website, and we just released the final version of the thing. So going here, this has like the 5 videos covering everything from this point all the way to the render. So just check that out. It's all in there. Cool. Thanks, Franco. I'm probably gonna do a few more things for the iPad soon. So yeah, keep an eye on that. All right, guys. So it's been great. I just extended myself a little bit longer, but